Hey, so finally I'm getting to this video on cane selection. So the first thing I want to talk about is this, which is the radius gauge from Harvard Double Reeds. The reason why I like this a lot is because for checking straightness, this is a certified straight edge, which you could use other, things that are straight, but this is a truly straight edge, so it gives you a better indication. You're not going to have sometimes surfaces are a little uneven and it can give you a not as accurate, why not? If it's just that simple, why not have an accurate straight edge? So then you, for checking diameter, you'll want these little radius gauges. The thing is, on many other radius gauges, it's more like a third of a circle or like an entire half of a circle, and these are about a fourth. And the reason that this is nice is because it gives you a better indication of the part of the cane that you're actually going to end up using, like that width of cane and the shape of that. So it actually gives a more accurate reading of the shape of the diameter and other things, which is just as important as the size of the diameter is the shape of the diameter, which I think sometimes people ignore. Because that really affects how it's going to gouge, how it's going to interact with the shape of the blade of the gouger. So this is why I like this. And now I'm just going to get into some different diagrams. So this I drew for you. It's on, actually let me put another piece of paper behind it. So this is for straightness. And I don't know if you can see, but I'll send you a picture of this. But this is ideal, is that we have no light showing, and that it may just kind of come up on the sides, but there should not be light showing in the middle of the piece of cane. And then something that's kind of good, so that's good. And then kind of good would be, if it does come up a little more on the sides, like if it's a little smiley, is what my undergrad teacher would say. That's okay. If it's smiling a little bit. Drastic smiling, like if it's that's not good either. But just a little bit of smiley, especially if it's kind of symmetrical, but it doesn't, sometimes I'll frequently pick pieces of cane where it's maybe more smiley on one side, but it just shouldn't be drastically smiley. If it's too smiley, it'll get kicked out of the gouge, or it'll gouge the sides of the piece of the cane, or it'll gouge the ends of the pieces of cane. It'll gouge the ends much thinner, because those ends will want to stick up more and they'll get chewed out by the blade. Which can cause looseness, because the fulcrum of things gets thrown off. But then there's, like I said, slightly smilier on one side. I don't really think it's that big of a deal, but it will cause something. But it's, main thing is we don't want light in the center. So then the things that we absolutely don't want are light showing like this, where this is the radius gauge, the flat edge, and then there's light showing in the middle. That's not what you want, because if a piece of cane is bent like this, when you fold that piece of cane over, so that's whenever you're looking with the shiny bark side down is what we're talking about, So if this piece of cane is bent like this, it's okay, because then when we turn it around and fold it over a little, if it's smiley a little, when we turn it around and fold it over, that's going to clasp together more. The grains of the cane have that tendency in them, the way they've grown. But then if we have a piece of cane that's like this, where it's showing light in the center, like it's frowny, then that means when we turn it over and fold it over, the piece of cane is going to want to do this naturally, come apart at the top. That's the way that the grains have grown, and there's no really correcting that at this point. So, people talk about bending things, to go into the gouger. Well, and, sometimes, that could be the thing is that it doesn't really end up working so well, because the piece of cane just goes back to its regular shape. So pick something that's gonna work out in the end. And also what's not good is if it has, if it's like this, where it has pockets of light, especially if they're significant, kind of little pockets of light. That's kind of a problem. I'm not talking about little. That can cause also, unevenness, but if there are little pockets of light like that, that's also not good, right? These are not good. These, okay. So that's when it comes to straightness, right? So like now I'm checking, the piece of cane. So what I do is kind of a little different, but I find it a little more efficient than what I've seen, and I end up finding more pieces. Is that so I turn it until I see that there's no light in the center, or that there's that it is showing no light in the center. Then I mark the beginning of that place with a long line on the piece of cane, like that, you see? So I mark, this is okay, the beginning of where I hope the diameter, that it stays, I hope that it stays straight for a while. Okay, so it stays straight for a decent while. So I marked where it stopped being straight. So I kept turning it until it stopped being straight. The minute it started becoming frowny again, I drew another line. So that means that between this line and this line is the part of the piece of cane that is straight. So when we check diameter, there is no reason to check the diameter on all of this area. That's a waste of time. So and it's also good because you will now know that you have to choose a center of a diameter that has enough on both sides to create a piece of cane that you could use. And you're not going to end up picking, a piece like this, like where, say the middle point of the diameter is here, then you end up picking a piece of cane where it goes past the point where it's really straight. That's a problem. You want to find a diameter that is completely encompassed within these 2 points, right? And it works way faster this way. So I'm just like, okay, make a point, draw a line, and then it stops being straight, draw another line. Okay, now this is the area that I checked the diameter of, boom. Now let's get to diameter now that I've said that. What are we looking for in diameter? So, let me put a piece of paper behind this, okay, so with diameter, the ideal diameter fills evenly on both sides throughout the length of the piece of cane. So we'll get to that. But as you're scooting the piece of cane, up and down the radius in these little, radiuses, you want it to stay for the full length of the cane. But firstly we're looking for, a piece of cane that actually fits the right way. It should fill evenly. So it should hit the center. It should be definitely filling in the center. Just like with straightness, we don't want to see holes and we don't want light in the center. You also don't want light in the center in this case. But you also don't want it to just be hitting at one point, which is called pointy cane. Which some people use it, especially if they, some people, really, it depends. Mostly very pointy cane will crack. And sometimes, and the thing is with pointy cane is, if you think about it, if the diameter is pointy, like this is an extreme example, the diameter is pointy, then when the blade that is shaped more like, this goes in to cut the piece of cane. When it goes in to cut the piece of cane, it's gonna gut out these ribs a lot. And you're not gonna be able to scrape for depth as much. And also the sound of sometimes these, it depends on the gouge though, obviously. But it can cause problems. But you'll end up with, more of a spiny maybe reed, but you'll end up with more gutted out of the kind of channels of the reed. But anyways, so this is fine, if it fills nicely. If it fills a third or so, that's also fine. Like, it does need to hit in the middle and be symmetrically filling on both sides. This is what you don't want, which is light in the center or something weirdly shaped. Like, also I forgot to mention, like, if it dips way more on one side than the other side, you want it to fill kind of symmetrically. This is not a good example I've drawn. This is a no good. Shows light is also oddly shaped and warped, like that. It's not going to gouge nicely. Then you have too pointy of a piece of cane. Sometimes if the piece of cane is very good grain quality, this thing can kind of pass a little. But much of the time it'll crack. or there'll be kind of other issues, but I'm a little, you know, I don't want it too pointy, obviously, but they're, very rarely do you get a piece of cane that really truly fills like this beautifully. So, you know, you have to be a little realistic too. So this is the piece of cane that I was giving an example of. So let me recheck again. Okay, this was the area. Yes, okay, so now I'm gonna do that. And you usually, depends on the gouge, depends on, you know, preference, especially the gouge though. It depends on what diameter you'll kind of prefer. So like, smaller diameter generally gives a bigger opening, bigger diameter gives a flatter opening, but it really depends, you know. Sometimes a really flatter diameter can not gouge the sides thin enough because they don't come in enough to hit the blade, and then that can cause thick sides, and you can actually get a bulbous opening that way too. So it really depends, but these are general terms. So the thing is, so then I just see, sometimes what I do is I just start in the biggest diameter just to see where it kind of generally actually hits, and then I go smaller until I find the real diameter of that piece of cane. So I'm seeing it hits in a kind of pointy fashion, but not in a way where it dips so drastically that I'm really concerned about it cracking. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use it. And it's within the piece of cane. So it's within the two lines that I drew. And so this is the little bit of tricky part, is really marking the diameter. You have to take it off and kind of memorize where the center, you want to mark the center of where it hits, right? So that you can cut on either side of it and get a nice symmetrical piece of cane. Sometimes I have to recheck this sometimes. So I really want to make sure I'm getting the center of that diameter. So I'm marking it in the center. There. So for about 10.5, 10. Honestly, because it's a little pointy, it's probably kind of 10. But anyways, this is a good example though. It's a nice, you know, I don't have to recheck the straightness because I already checked. So see, I marked that the diameter. This is where, so these are the two lines again. This line and this line. So I know between those is where it's straight. So, and then this is the center of the diameter. So I know I have enough on both sides to evenly cut on either side an equal distance from that center I marked. Ooh, be careful, unlike me. It's a slippery table. So sometimes that's another thing. For just safety, I've cut myself way too many times doing this. So I've started putting this kind of plasticky groove, this thing that like, I don't know, people put like their dishes on when serving food. I've started slicing my cane on that. So you're using a razor blade, obviously, because a splitter, you won't get this accuracy. So with a cane splitter. And the thing is, this might seem laborious to some people, but right now I'm demonstrating, and I usually do this very quickly. I mean, and the good thing is that you'll know that you actually got pieces of cane that will work, that will actually make a reed that has tight sides and a nice opening that closes from side to center. And it's very much worth your time, I think, because then you spend less time fussing with the reed in the end. And then this is not, okay, thank goodness. So the last thing I was gonna talk about was twistiness. And this piece of cane does not appear twisty at all, which is super nice. That is super, super nice. So, because twistiness is an extremely common problem. And twistiness will also cause the piece of cane to gouge very unevenly. When you're, whatever gouger you're using, it doesn't matter, it'll gouge unevenly. So, this is an example of a piece of cane that's twisty. So after this, sometimes you can only really ascertain this after you've split the piece of cane. So it's usually the last thing I get to check. Now I'm gonna hold this close to me. So this is an example of a, piece of cane that is twisty. Do you see that? Do you see how, I'm using this nail. Do you see how it's kind of twisty? It isn't, there aren't two nice parallel planes on either side of the cane. It twists. That is no good. Now you see how the piece of cane we just split is not twisty. It's nice, parallel planes on either side. That's what we want. This was another piece of cane. I think that was an example of twisty. Yes. Twisty. After splitting open, I couldn't use it. Oh gosh. I should... this one is not twisty, but this was an example of something that was just too smiley on one end. See how it comes up so much on that one end? It would get kicked out of the gouge. I could try making like student read, maybe. Something. If it would go through the gouge. Yeah, but these are just some pieces of cane I'm giving as an example. So, first thing, so just to recap, lots of mumbling in this video. Welcome to my mind. So just to recap, first thing we check is which part of the cane would be straight. So we rotated the piece of cane and then marked where it started being straight and where it stopped being straight. Some pieces of cane honestly have no straight part, or no part that has a significant, that's straight for long enough to where you could actually get a piece of cane out of it and get a reed out of it. So that happens. So then I end up not being able to use that, because if something isn't straight, there's literally no point in going on. No, that's the most important thing, is straightness. And then the second, almost equally important, but maybe less so, but slightly, but which I think is still mandatory for me to use, is the diameter. Be centered. It really hit in the middle and have and equally fill on the left and the right. And that it not be like too pointy, but it feel in a way that seems substantial enough, and that it's centered and it's what's the word I'm looking for? Symmetrical. The diameter is symmetrical on both sides. So that's really important. And then after that, after you find that there's, in that part of the piece of cane that you found was actually straight, or had no light coming in the center when you were putting it, rotating it. If you found that between those two marks that you made, there's a part of the cane that's, that has a nice diameter, and that perfectly fits within those 2 points whenever you extend beyond that center point to get a, substantial wide enough piece of cane. Then you can split it and then see, okay, is it twisty? If it's not twisty, then you have a piece of cane. Now, I don't have my planer with me right now, but left it in Boston. But so then I would find the straightest part of this piece. I don't have my splitter either, but I would find the straightest part of this piece, so maybe now I'm looking at this and I'm realizing, straightness is not as perfect as maybe it could be, but it's still pretty good. I think just the very end of this, I would guillotine off, so I just mark that. And then whatever else comes off on the other side. So I'd be left with a piece of cane. So first I'd take this off, and then whatever else comes off on that side. And then, and what I'd be left with then would be a piece of cane of, this length. So sometimes I even take another piece of cane that's not gouged yet, and I just line it up and see, okay, what is the most straightest part of this, larger piece of cane I just cut that I haven't guillotined to length yet. And I see, okay, what is the I see what is the straightest part, while putting it up to light like this. So, okay, I could guillotine that little end, and then, I could guillotine that little end. Yeah, and that would be good. Yes, then it would be nice. So guillotine this little end, and then the rest of that. So this is what I would guillotine, this little part, and I mark that, and then the rest of that, whenever I put it through the guillotine. Then you would get a piece of cane that's at this length. And then usually, before putting into the gougers, into the gouger, whatever gouger you're using, I pare the ends a little to where instead of being totally square, it looks more like this, where it pairs in at the top. That helps the cane, helps the blade center itself more easily into the piece of cane. And then I make sure that, oh, sorry, I think I skipped. So yeah, I split it. Then I put it in a planer, you know, that I get it down, get it down to where it's kind of flat like this, in a planer. Because like from this very curved piece of cane, you want to get it down to like a planed piece of cane. And then after that, I'll pare it like I just did. And make sure that whenever I put a ruler up to it, it is about 8 millimeters wide. Sorry, 8 millimeters wide and no more. And not too much less. You know, not under 7.5 or anything like that. But like around 8 or a little under. It should be a little under, probably 8 millimeters wide, about 8. And then it'll gouge nicely in whatever gouger you're putting it in. So that's what I look for. And it seems laborious, but it actually goes very, very quickly. So diameter, find the area that's straight. Straightness, find the area that's straight in the piece of cane, then find the diameter. Find a good diameter within that. Sometimes you won't find straightness. Sometimes you'll find straightness and you won't find diameter, and then you won't be able to use that, or you could use it as a student, you know, make a student read off of it, make 20 bucks off of it. And then, or just make the read anyways, who cares, you know, see what happens. And, but the thing is, I've always noticed, like, you always notice these kinds of issues. Like if the diameter doesn't really hit in the center, this and that, it'll just gouge in a way that doesn't have the right measurements, and you'll be compensating a lot in the scraping, or just simply not get the result you want. The reed won't come together nicely, and the vibrations therefore won't come together nicely. So that's what I'm looking for in cane selection. That was extremely unstructured, and you know, I was not reading off a script clearly, so sorry about things being a little unclear, but basically straightness, diameter, check for twistiness, then find the straightest part on the long piece of cane you just split. You know, sometimes I just take another piece of cane and, you know, do that again. Mark it, guillotine it to this length, then put it in a planer to flatten it. Then make sure, and then I recheck after planing to make sure that that center didn't go off, you know, make sure. And sometimes I'll take a razor blade and make sure, you know, then replane it, just to make sure the center is still the center after you've planed it, because sometimes it can shift around. Then make sure it's not like make sure it's between 7.5 millimeters and 8 millimeters, not over, not under. I mean, 7.5 may be getting a little small even. But, you know, then gouge it and make a reed. So thank you, and sorry for that just was not planned at all. So appreciate you watching.